The more you try to laugh, the less they fear you.
Seriously? But Merz said the opposite.
No.
Merz said the opposite. Merz said that the Russians are mocking us, and Merz is afraid to give Taurus, and Merz won't send troops. So why should German, who will end up drowning their own in the economy, lecture us? The more they do, the more afraid they'll be, and we'll strike when the time comes. So sit and wait.
On Russian TV, there was a real showdown. They tried to calm down propagandist Solovyov. Someone said, if you are going to threaten Europe, then go ahead and hit already. Stop talking. And Solovyov, he just keeps saying, the strike will happen someday. He openly admits it's all about scaring Europe and reducing military aid to Ukraine. As for negotiations, nothing new. Peace is only possible on Moscow's terms. In plain English, Ukraine surrendering. New week, new Russian nonsense. I'm Sophia, and this was Spin Snipers, where we tear apart Kremlin drama and serve up the brutal facts fast. This week in Russia, everyone is losing their minds about Germany. On Russian TV, host Solovyov accused German Chancellor Friedrich Merz of Nazism. Why? Because Merz called Russia barbaric. But here is what Merz actually said. He described Russia's actions as a deep barbarism and said, don't expect peace anytime soon. Just a blunt, honest assessment of the real political and military situation, nothing crazy. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the media has twisted everything, and Solovyov is back at it, threatening nukes again.
That is precisely why, when I speak about a nuclear strike and its unfortunately near inevitability, it is not because we want it, but because Merz is following the path laid down by his Nazi predecessors, paths that always end in colossal disasters for the unfortunate German people who lack the will, that beloved German philosophical word, to rid themselves of their Nazi roots. The punishment will be terrible. But how can one be such an absolutely like Friedrich Merz to manage even here to insert Nazi elements? It comes out of the subconscious. The inner core reveals itself. There is nothing that can be done about it.
While Russia screams about Nazism and draws parallels with Hitler, the reality is that their own dictator is following Hitler's paths and methods. Calling Russians barbarians does not even need explanations. Who are they? They are the ones who invaded a peaceful neighbor country. In 2014, they occupied Crimea. In 2022, they launched a full-scale war. Putin uses the same methods as Hitler. He justifies killings by claiming he protects Russian-speaking people in eastern Ukraine. But that's a myth. Sure, in big cities, people spoke Russian before the war, but in villages, Ukrainian. And why did Russian language come to this region at all? For centuries, Russia banned Ukrainian culture and punished anyone who tried to preserve it. It's easy to accuse the West of Russophobia or Nazism when there is no proof. Meanwhile, they don't notice their own real Nazism.
The problem is that the moment a European politician starts saying anything about Russia, calling Russians barbarians, talking about low culture, in short, repeating everything they like to say about us, he is quoting Adolf Hitler, even if he doesn't realize that he is quoting Hitler. This is because Nazi propaganda used these narratives constantly and systematically. They fought the Bolsheviks as hordes. The SS published a pamphlet titled Der Untermensch, the subhuman. There was talk of barbarism and of a shield against Bolshevism. All of this existed. The Nazis framed it politically, claiming they were not really fighting Russians but Bolsheviks. Yet, in reality, they were fighting Russians.
And once again, Russians are twisting the facts. By their logic, the Soviet Union was supposedly only inhabited by Russians, not dozens of other nationalities. Now, let's talk about Putin, a dictator whose methods actually resemble Hitler's. Many historians and analysts point out that Putin's rhetoric about lost greatness and his justification of aggressive wars echoes with the ideas in Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. Even the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Putin has repeatedly tried to justify the non-aggression treaty between USSR and Nazi Germany as necessary for security. In Russia, of course, no one talks about that. Putin and his circle regularly compare modern Russia and the war in Ukraine to the fight against Nazism just to justify their war and rally support.
Therefore, today, any Western politician who uses such language about Russia is directly quoting Adolf Hitler. And this is exactly what needs to be repeated to them, said out loud, documented, quotes pulled out and used to strike them directly in the face politically. I don't think they will suffer because of this. I don't think they will feel any pangs of conscience. But this is important for our audience. We must show that all this Russophobia is not based on Russia's actions or inaction, not on right or wrong decisions, but on the roots of a civilization that treated Russians, Africans, and millions of other peoples in exactly the same way. Because in Europe, they wanted to do to us what they failed to do, because the Russian people do not surrender.
Europe only started pushing back against Russians after the full-scale war against Europe began, when Russia and dictator Putin came to kill and pursue their imperial ambitions, when Putin and his army broke all international rules and laws. That's when the world reacted, because few want to deal with the war criminals. Meanwhile, we still see Russian athletes, actors and performers freely active in Europe. That clearly doesn't match the accusation of Russophobia. But this time, Germany has become the main target of Russian propaganda.
And how long would Germany last? And what if we finally start working actively against Germany, the way it works against us? What would actually happen then? These are all such uncomfortable questions. At the same time, like J.D. Vance, I love Europe, but with a very particular kind of love. And as for respect, I deeply respect the great history of Europe. One just has to understand when it truly was great, and for which Europeans I feel ashamed. But everything else, I respect very much indeed.
What made me laugh the most in all this nonsense was a hatred exchange on Russian TV. Solovyov got called out. Russia keeps threatening to strike, but never actually does. Maybe they don't have the strength, or maybe Moscow can only fight a peaceful neighbor with no nukes or anything. And by the way, in all 4 years, they have not even taken Donbas, which they are now trying to grab through blackmail and negotiations. That's what they call a strong army. But honestly, just watch yourself for how these so-called trust debates play out among the propagandists.
Just pour 30 grams of schnapps and instantly, everything happens instantly.
If it's 30 grams of schnapps, then they were saying, we'll still march down the Champs-Élysées.
Right, they'll march in columns. As prisoners, they'll march.
Only at a gay parade, maybe, down the Champs-Élysées.
Why take them as prisoners? We won't take Berlin by force alive anymore, no. We'll just wipe it off the face of the earth. Just a pile of ashes on the spot, a flagpole, and that's it.
Well, then strike now. You always say, we'll wipe them out. Strike.
Why? Let them.
Oh, one will die. The more you shout, we'll strike, the less scary it gets.
Yes, and then we strike and it's over. It happens every time. That's why Merz already said he's a...
True power speaks quietly, doesn't shout, and always keeps its promises.
And who has it? Who actually has it? Tell us about it.
Well, if you promised, then strike.
And we will strike, and you wait. Every time we've hit the Germans, and we will keep hitting. And every time the Germans try to teach us how to live, every time, behave quietly.
Well, then strike. I'll sit in Berlin and watch how you strike Berlin.
And then, once again, when we enter Berlin, there'll be a queue for porridge.
But you said you wouldn't enter Berlin. It'll be ashes.
Right. Then no one will be there to watch. They'll be surprised when it rises and asks what happened.
Here's how Solovyov got concerned. First, he says he'll march into Berlin, then that he'll destroy it. Seems like he's already lost track on his own threats. But the message is clear. He openly admits that all these theatrics is just to scare the West. To scare Europeans who still actively support Ukraine, back the Ukrainian army, and help Kyiv stand strong, stay independent, and resist Putin's dictatorship. Solovyov wants to frighten you, dear viewers, but all we can do is to laugh at his hysterical threats.
They already watch every broadcast, so let them watch and remember, I despise thee and grieve for the German people, who cannot show willpower and are again following the path that has led Germany several times to the brink of total destruction. This time, it will happen.
And while Solovyov is blaring that he's supposedly ready to strike Europe, at the same time he blames Europe for preparing for war. How does it even make sense? The truth is, the only country that, according to their statements, is actually ready to fight is Russia. And according to the Kremlin's top supporters, the war against Ukraine is just the beginning.
To win this long-lasting war, which will not end tomorrow or the day after, is a massive challenge. It is systemic, prolonged, and will consist of multiple stages. The Russian-Ukrainian confrontation is just one initial stage of a much longer confrontation for which Europe is preparing and which the United States is pushing Europe toward. At the same time, it must be understood that what we are witnessing is a military conflict aimed at triggering full-scale operations on the continent, drawing Europe in, weakening Europe, and destroying Europe as the main potential and actual economic competitor to the United States.
After all these threats to strike Europe and other nonsense that defies logic, the discussions turned to peace negotiations. In Moscow, they made up that only Russia is interested in negotiations while supposedly no one else cares.
When I watch the negotiations over Ukraine and right next to them, it feels like everyone understands that there will be no peace and that no one actually wants it. It's all such a sham. I am absolutely convinced that Russia wants peace. Truly, I am completely certain, and I understand why, and everyone should understand it. But no other party wants peace, including the Americans. They are perfectly satisfied with this situation, the state of peace negotiations, where they appear to be peacemakers while also tying Russia's hands. Because as long as you are negotiating for peace, there are certain things you cannot fully apply on the battlefield. So overall, it all looks very strange to everyone, to put it mildly.
So if you really want peace, pull your troops out. The war, as Trump once said, could end in just 24 hours. One condition: Russians, take your barbaric army home and stop terrorizing civilians in Ukraine. By the way, it looks like soon the enemies list will include not only Europe, but even Trump himself, who used to be so popular in Moscow.
Basically, I too was under some of the charm of the US president. But he has really lost something. I look at him now, and it's not even very funny anymore.
He's become petty.
And not very amusing. There's this self-admiration, and he's lost all sense of measure. He doesn't know limits. He doesn't know limits. On top of that, there's a real sense that he is becoming increasingly dangerous for the world, despite all these so-called gestures toward being a peacemaker. In fact, the world has become much more dangerous.
In Russia, everyone is to blame except themselves, and of course, following their usual script, they immediately attacked Zelensky. According to Russian propagandists, it's supposedly his fault that so many people left Ukraine.
This must simply be acknowledged. He has long lost the human qualities that a president must have. He hates the people who, unfortunately for themselves, voted for this terrorist and murderer. No Ukrainian ruler at any point in their tenure has led the country to such human losses. At the same time, he could have said, "I am defending the homeland," but then 10 million people would not have fled the country. This means that the people do not see you as their defender.
Really, in my view, Ukraine is a democratic country, and it was our people who made their choice in 2019. And somehow people didn't leave back then. They only started fleeing massively because of the war that Russia itself started, when missiles and Shahed attacks residential neighborhoods and homes where civilians are sleeping. And continuing on that topic of negotiations, in Russia they repeated the classic mantra: peace on their terms. In plain English, Ukraine's surrender.
When they talk about negotiations, I restrain myself every single time. Every single time. Every single time. There are no negotiations. There are clearly defined, fair demands from the Russian side, which we repeat again and again. They must be fulfilled in full.
And while Russia throws itself into hysteria, threatens strike on Europe, and demands that Ukraine as an independent country disappear from the map, they keep delaying peace and bombing every day. One thing is clear for us: we must remain strong, united, and refuse to believe this nonsense. That's it for today. While the Russian propaganda machine keeps running, we'll keep exposing their lies. I'm Sophia, and this was Spin Snipers. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and don't fall for their spin.